What's up everybody, Nate here, and our jobs market landscape is once again shifting in the United States. We've gone from the Great Resignation, where millions of Americans were voluntarily quitting their jobs, to now companies laying off millions of people saying, we just can't afford to keep you. Businesses are struggling, jobs are completely changing, and what this might leave us with by the end of this year is absolutely no more hiring and possibly higher unemployment. So today I want to talk about what is happening in the jobs market and how all of that is going to affect our economy, not only in 2022, but beyond. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I recently saw a news article about Google's CEO where he was warning his employees and Americans about the future of our economy. Basically, Google said that they are not immune to economic conditions and that they are going to be affected just as much as other businesses. Not only that, but Google, one of the biggest tech companies on the planet, is pausing all hiring for the foreseeable future. Basically, Google is seeing the writing on the wall. They're seeing that there's a potential for a recession in the future, and they don't want to have a whole bunch of employees just to eventually fire them down the road. That is going to cause a lot more problems in our economy because now you have a lot of people who had incomes, who had debts and bills and living expenses to pay for, now not able to pay for them. They are going down in income, and that could potentially be Google's fault if they bite off more than they can chew in 2022. And like I said, Google is definitely not alone here. There have been tech companies and other businesses all throughout the United States that have been feeling the pressure of an economic slowdown in the United States. Right now, you kind of have a few things swirling around to create the perfect storm for massive layoffs and unemployment in this country. Basically, you have the Federal Reserve starting to raise their benchmark interest rates. Now, why is this such a big deal for businesses? Well, many businesses, especially startup companies, rely on loans and debt and investor interest to grow their company. They don't want to have a lot of profits and revenue and a lot of money sitting in the bank when they could be using that money to grow their business. So that's why a lot of these tech companies and startup IPOs don't really make a massive profit. They're spending every dime they have to grow the business, and in doing that, they can grow very quickly, and a lot of investors will continue to put money behind them. The problem is we have a lot of businesses right now following that expanding model, but we are not in an economy that is expanding. All of these companies that are no longer making a profit, from your small IPOs to your tech giants, well, they are starting to fail. They need to have a profit and big revenues in order to support their company and their employees through harsh economic times. The Federal Reserve is directly responsible for that because they are raising their interest rates. Over the last 2 years, their interest rates sat at 0%. That means investors could basically pour all of their money into these companies, and why wouldn't they? They want to take as much money as they possibly can from loans in the United States government, and they want to find a place for it. They don't want to just have it sitting in a bank account, because as we know, money that just sits in the bank loses value. Why wouldn't you take your money and start investing it? Well, businesses over the last 2 years may have gotten a little greedy and may have over invested in things that aren't really going to make them money in the long term. Over the last 2 years, we saw an economic expansion. We saw all of these businesses launch on the New York Stock Exchange and start booming and grow faster than they ever have because there's so much money and investors were looking for a place to put it. So they just started shoving it in the New York Stock Exchange and of course the housing market and all of these other places. In doing so, there was also this issue of supply chain problems in the United States. We had an issue of the Great Resignation. Millions of Americans were going through a period where they realized they hated their job or they wanted something else, something more fulfilling and something that was going to pay them a whole lot more. They saw the writing on the wall too in 2021, where we had millions of people voluntarily quitting their jobs all at once. That left businesses without the ability to produce a lot of products, run their stores and businesses. With all of that money floating around our economy though, businesses saw an opportunity. They wanted to hire a whole bunch of people to not only alleviate those supply chain concerns, but to grow their business. But this was at a time when millions of people were quitting their jobs because of the Great Resignation. So what businesses had to do was basically give in to all of the demands that employees had. Not only did they give them work-life balance, and they also gave them the ability to work from home and have better benefits like insurance and more PTO. Well, they also flat out just paid them more. They increased wages, they increased salaries, so that way they could attract a lot more people. And in 2021, this was a really easy thing to do. Remember, interest rates were really low during this time, so investors and banks and all these other financial institutions could continue to throw money at these businesses because they wanted to continue to expand our economy and expand their own investments. And remember, they don't want that money just sitting around. So these businesses had a whole lot of money flowing into them. So yeah, they could pay people pretty much whatever they wanted. Money was really easy to come by. But now we're running into a problem in 2022 where millions of people make way too much money. All of these payrolls have expanded for businesses way too high, and they've hired way too many people, meaning they have to cut back in order to make their business survive. We now know that a lot of these companies are not making a lot of profits, so if they're not making a lot of money, well then how are they going to pay their employees? They're not getting any of that investor liquidity, and they're not able to take on any additional debt because interest rates are getting way too high. If they were to do that, well then they'd run into a problem in the future because that would cut into their profits. They would have a lot more costs because of what's going on today. So businesses are laying off hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees because they just want to survive. They have to make the choice of, is their business going to survive, or are they going to try to find a way to pay all of these people? Not only that, but new hires and the employees that are currently in a lot of these businesses are being treated a lot differently than they were back in 2020 and in 2021. Over the last 2 years, a lot of people realized the things that they want out of work. They've realized that work isn't everything about their life because of the pandemic. Millions of Americans were temporarily laid off or just flat out fired in 2020 because of the pandemic. We had economic lockdowns, and with a lot less people spending money, well, these businesses immediately saw the flack because of that. That gave a lot of people time to really think about the things that they wanted to do because they were getting all of this money from the federal government. It wasn't typical unemployment. Typical unemployment means that you have to go out immediately and find a new job. That way you can pay your bills, or you have to find any other means of income. But a lot of people didn't really have to do that because for a lot of Americans, they were making a lot more from unemployment than they were at their normal jobs. That got a lot of Americans thinking, do they want to go back to that job after their layoff has ended? Do they want to switch their career? Do they want to go back to school? Americans started learning things online with the help of YouTube and blogs. So it was at that point that Americans realized they have the power in this business relationship. Now the power dynamic has once again shifted back towards the companies. New hires and current employees are losing a lot of that work from home life that they loved over the last 2 years. Businesses are now forcing employees to go back to work, which a year ago couldn't work because Americans could just go find another job. There were so many jobs available in so many places that were willing to pay you more because they needed employees. Now in 2022, these businesses are looking to cut workers. So if you don't want to work in the office, well, then you can go home. That is causing a series of problems for workers and businesses all throughout the country. You now have employees that have to get to work. And in a lot of places in the United States, that involves a car. And the only way that we power our cars is through gas, meaning that gas prices are going to continue to go up because demand is rising in the United States. These people have to get to work, and the only way to do that is to gas up and drive. That's hurting Americans' finances though, because gas prices are out of control and it's costing Americans hundreds of dollars just to go to their job. Meanwhile, jobs are not paying what they did back in 2021. Bonuses have pretty much dried up, and pay raises are also drying up too. They're not going to be able to give out those big raises like they did before because they just don't have the same money. So Americans are kind of getting the short end of the stick on all of this because businesses are trying to do what they can to survive. Now, this is something that the Federal Reserve has been screaming about and pleading with businesses to do over the last few months. They actually want all businesses to have a hiring freeze for the foreseeable future. They know people are making too much money, and they know that businesses are not going to survive if they continue to pay all of their employees an inflated wage in 2022. Economic conditions just will not support it. So the Federal Reserve wants people to pause their hiring. Now, right now in the US, we have a jobs market that is still pretty strong. Unemployment sits at around 3.6% as of June 2022, and job listings and job postings and the amount of hiring being done is still pretty strong across the board. However, this simply cannot continue in the foreseeable future. However, what this could potentially mean is the abrupt end of the Great Resignation. As your economy gets a lot more strict, as things get a lot more expensive, prices are going up, and interest rates rise all throughout the United States, well, Americans are going to have to figure out ways to combat that. And one of the only ways they can do that is at their job. They can't really quit their job and try to look for a new one if one, businesses aren't hiring, and two, we are in a recession. That is just too much of a risk for most Americans. It wasn't super risky to quit your job in 2021 because there were so many jobs available, so many high-paying jobs that you could quit and find another job tomorrow. But in 2022, it is definitely not like that. So Americans now have to be very careful with work. Now, we'll really start to know the effect that the Federal Reserve is having on the jobs market and how much Americans are constricting the economy even more by not spending because they can't afford anything when you see job postings start to decrease in the United States. Right now, they're staying pretty steady at around 300,000, but when they start to drop to 200,000 and 100,000 month over month, then that means businesses simply cannot afford to continue to hire people. And once that happens, the next thing that will happen is unemployment. Businesses are going to have to fire people in order to cut costs, or they're going to have to lay off people so that they can stay afloat. That could eventually send us into a recession in the United States because with millions of Americans out of work, now you have so many more people unable to buy things. That is kind of sort of what the Federal Reserve is looking for in 2022. They know that incomes are high. They know that our job force is strong, so that gives them the leeway to continue to raise interest rates and pull a lot of their monetary stimulus, all reducing demand in our economy. But with so many people out of work, well, naturally people are going to be spending less money, meaning that demand is going to come down even more. So what it looks like in the United States is that this jobs explosion is finally starting to fizzle out all throughout the country. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about the potential massive layoffs that could be coming for the United States? Do you think that we're going to see unemployment and layoffs spike in the US sometime soon? Or do you think that businesses and our economy are eventually going to recover from all of this and our entire jobs market is going to remain strong? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out updates 7 days a week over here on this channel, and I've actually got another one ready for you right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.